Welcome to HOA Control Freaks. She loved measuring because it let her feel powerful. You just earned yourself a deadline, Courtney screamed, jabbing her laminated rule card at my chest. Karen screamed that my neighbor said the line was different, and neighbors outranked surveys. I stood in my side yard holding the orange violation door hanger she had slapped on my door an hour earlier, the thing still damp from the humid Buffalo evening. She was already on her phone, threatening to call the city inspector, the HOA attorney, and anyone else who would listen. I work as a warehouse inventory controller, which means I track every item and timestamp that moves through our facility. I keep records because later I need them. So when Courtney Cooper, vice chair of the Ironwood Trails Reserve Association Design Review Board, started her campaign to stop my fence replacement, I wrote down every word, because later I plan to read them back to her. This is a community where rules are used as leverage, not guidance, and Courtney had perfected the art of blocking approvals out of spite. The conflict started 3 weeks earlier when I submitted my fence application. The old fence was rotting, leaning, half the posts sunk into mud. I hired a contractor, got a surveyor to mark the line, filled out every form the HOA required. The application was clean. But the day after I submitted it, Courtney showed up at my door with that laminated rule card and a smile that looked like it hurt her face. "Your gate is facing the wrong direction," she said, tapping the card. "Security issue. I do not need your explanation, I need your payment. The fine schedule starts at $200 and doubles every week until compliance." I pointed out that the gate faced the same direction as the old one, the same direction as every gate on the block. She shrugged. The old fence was grandfathered. New construction means new standards. "You missed the hearing where we updated the orientation policy." "I never got a notice about any hearing," I said. She smiled wider. "That is not my problem. You are responsible for checking the board meeting calendar. Ignorance is not an excuse." That was the first escalation. A notice claiming I missed a hearing I was never told about. I went online, pulled the HOA meeting minutes from the last 6 months. There was no gate orientation policy. There was no hearing. I emailed Courtney with screenshots. She replied in all caps except the word HOA, saying the minutes were incomplete and official records required a formal request. I submitted a formal records request. 2 days later, Courtney sent a letter on HOA letterhead saying records requests required a $30 processing fee per document, a 30-day waiting period, and payment up front. I paid the fee. 30 days later, she sent me 3 pages of redacted minutes with entire sections blacked out, and a note saying sensitive board discussions were exempt under privacy rules. Meanwhile, my fence contractor was scheduled for a tight morning window, and if Courtney stopped the work, I would pay a $1,500 cancellation fee. I was in the middle of a renovation schedule and delays could cost me thousands. The contractor needed the permits cleared, the start date locked, and no surprises. Courtney knew all of this because I had mentioned it in my application cover letter. She started calling the city with misleading complaints to slow permits and inspections. She told the zoning office my fence encroached on a utility easement. She told the building department my contractor was unlicensed. Both were lies, but each complaint triggered a review that added days. The city inspector showed up, checked the plans, found nothing wrong, and told me off the record that someone was wasting his time. The second escalation came when Courtney hit me with a retaliatory records denial unless I paid ridiculous copy fees and wait 30 more days. She claimed I was harassing the board and any further requests would require board approval, which only met quarterly. That meant my next chance to get records was 3 months out, long after my contractor deadline. I called a local mediator who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Rita, and she had a reputation for keeping things legally clean. She listened to my timeline, reviewed the notices, and told me Courtney was violating the New York open meeting law. HOA boards cannot make policy changes without proper notice, and they cannot deny records requests without a legitimate exemption. Rita gave me a template letter citing the statute and told me to send it certified mail. I sent the letter. Courtney responded by scheduling an emergency design review hearing for my fence application, set for the following Monday at 7 in the morning. The notice arrived on Friday afternoon, giving me less than 72 hours. The hearing was not listed on the HOA website. No agenda was posted. Rita told me to show up and record everything. Monday morning, I walked into the Ironwood Trails Reserve Association clubhouse conference room. Courtney sat at the head of the table with two other board members, both looking uncomfortable. She had a stack of papers in front of her, the laminated rule card clipped to the top. I sat down, set my phone on the table in recording mode, and waited. "The board will back me because they are afraid of me," Courtney said, looking directly at the other two members. They nodded. She opened the hearing by reading a prepared statement claiming my fence application violated setback requirements, height restrictions, material standards, and the new gate orientation policy that still did not exist in any official record. I interrupted. "Show me the policy." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was dated 2 weeks earlier, unsigned, no board vote recorded. I asked who approved it. She said the board voted in executive session. I asked for the minutes. She said executive sessions are confidential. Rita had warned me about this. I pulled out my own stack of papers. The first document was the HOA bylaws, which required all policy votes to happen in open session with a quorum. The second was the New York statute on HOA governance. The third was a third-party surveyor report proving the line and calling out their misread standard. The surveyor had marked every corner, measured every setback, and confirmed that my fence was not only compliant, but actually set back farther than required. Courtney's face went red. She snatched the surveyor report, skimmed it, and shoved it back. "Surveys do not override board discretion," she said. "I do not need your explanation. I need your payment. The fine stands, and if you proceed with construction without approval, the HOA will remove the fence at your expense and place a lien on your property." One of the other board members, a man named Ed, cleared his throat. "Courtney, if the survey shows he is in compliance, maybe we should reconsider." She turned on him. "Do you want to be liable when his gate causes a security incident?" Ed went quiet. The other member, a woman named Linda, stared at her hands. I left the hearing with no approval, a $200 fine notice, and a stop work order. The contractor was supposed to start in 3 days. I called Rita. She told me to file a small claims complaint and request an injunction. I drafted the complaint that night, citing the violations of open meeting law, the fabricated policy, and the retaliatory denial of records. I filed it the next morning and emailed a copy to Courtney and the HOA attorney. The attorney, a man named Greg, called me that afternoon. He sounded tired. He said Courtney had not informed him of the hearing or the stop work order, and he was reviewing the bylaws to see if the board had exceeded its authority. He asked me to hold off on the injunction for 48 hours while he sorted it out. I agreed, but I told him the contractor deadline was non-negotiable. Greg called back the next day. He had reviewed the surveyor report, the bylaws, and the meeting minutes. He said Courtney had violated multiple procedural rules, the gate policy was invalid, and the fine was unenforceable. He was recommending the board rescind the stop work order and approve the application. I asked if Courtney agreed. He laughed. "She does not have a choice. I am the attorney. If she ignores me, the HOA is liable." I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The contractor arrived Thursday morning at 6:30. We started pulling the old fence panels, digging out the rotted posts. By 8, we had 3 panels down and the first post hole dug. That is when Courtney showed up, laminated rule card in hand, cell phone pressed to her ear. She was talking to someone, her voice loud enough to carry across the yard. "I need a tow truck at 428 Maple Terrace," she said. "Unauthorized contractor vehicle blocking HOA access." "Yes. Immediate removal." The contractor, a guy named Mike, looked at me. His truck was parked in my driveway, not blocking anything. I walked over to Courtney. "You cannot tow a vehicle from private property without the owner's consent," I said. She smiled. "The driveway easement is HOA property. Your contractor is in violation of parking restrictions." I pulled out my phone, opened the surveyor report, and showed her the plat map. The driveway was entirely on my lot. No easement. She waved the laminated card. The board has discretion to interpret boundaries in the interest of community safety. I told her to leave. She stayed. 10 minutes later, a flatbed tow truck pulled up. The driver, a middle-aged guy with a clipboard, got out and walked over. He looked at Mike's truck, then at Courtney, then at me. "Who called this in?" he asked. Courtney stepped forward. I did. "That vehicle is illegally parked on HOA property." The driver looked at me. "You the property owner?" I nodded. He looked at the truck clearly sitting in my driveway. "This does not look like HOA property," he said. I showed the tow driver the proof before the hook goes on and he refuses. I pulled up the Surveyor report on my phone, zoomed in on the plat map, and showed him the property line. He studied it, looked at Courtney, and shook his head. "I am not towing a vehicle off private property based on a dispute. If you want it removed, get a court order." He walked back to the truck and drove away. Courtney stood there, face red, laminated card shaking in her hand. "This is not over," she said. "The HOA will remove the fence at your expense." I told her to bring a work order in writing. She turned and walked back to her car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Mike looked at me. "That was insane." I nodded. Welcome to Ironwood Trails. We finished pulling the old fence by noon. Mike started setting the new posts, mixing concrete, checking levels. I kept my phone recording, just in case Courtney came back. She did not show, but a rideshare driver waiting at the curb rolled his eyes and muttered something about neighborhood drama when I walked past to grab more tools from the garage. By the end of the day, we had 6 posts set, the concrete curing, and the first section of panels ready to hang. Mike said he would be back in the morning to finish. I thanked him, paid him for the day, and went inside. That night, I checked my email. Courtney had sent a message to the entire HOA mailing list claiming I was proceeding with illegal construction, endangering the community, and defying board authority. She attached a photo of my side yard with the new posts visible, captioned with a warning that anyone who supported my project would face similar enforcement. Rita called me. She had seen the email. She told me to forward it to Greg immediately because it was defamatory and could be used as evidence of harassment. I forwarded it. Greg replied within an hour, saying he was scheduling an emergency board meeting and Courtney would be required to explain her actions. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon. I showed up with Rita, the Surveyor report, the email thread, the recording from the Monday hearing, and a printed timeline of every notice, fine, and threat Courtney had issued. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, and for the first time, there was a full audience. Word had spread. Neighbors who had been on the receiving end of Courtney's enforcement showed up, some with their own stories. Greg opened the meeting by reading the bylaws section on board authority. He explained that the board could not issue fines without a valid rule, could not deny records without a legal exemption, and could not retaliate against homeowners for exercising their rights. Then he turned to Courtney. "Do you have anything to say?" She stood, laminated card in hand. "The board will back me because they are afraid of me. This homeowner has defied every attempt at reasonable enforcement. He has ignored notices, bypassed procedures, and undermined the authority of this board. If we allow this, the entire community will descend into chaos." Greg cut her off. "The notices were based on a policy that was never properly adopted. The procedures you claim he bypassed do not exist in the bylaws. And the authority you are claiming does not extend to fabricating rules or denying access to public records." He turned to the other board members. "Did any of you vote to adopt the gate orientation policy?" Ed spoke first. "We never voted on it. Courtney said it was an emergency standard and she would bring it to us later." Linda nodded. "I thought it was temporary." Greg looked at Courtney. "Did you tell them it was temporary?" She did not answer. He turned back to the board. Under New York law, this board violated open meeting requirements. The gate policy is void. The fines are void. The stop work order is void. And if this homeowner chooses to pursue his small claims case, the HOA will lose. One of the neighbors in the audience raised her hand. "How many other policies has Courtney pushed through without a vote?" Greg looked at the minutes binder on the table. "I have been reviewing the records. There are at least 6 policies in the last year that were never formally adopted." The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting questions, demanding answers. Courtney tried to speak, but Greg waved her down. "This meeting is not a forum for grievances. I am recommending the board rescind all policies adopted without a proper vote, conduct an audit of enforcement actions, and adopt new procedures requiring evidence before any fines are issued. If anyone has been fined under an invalid policy, those fines will be refunded." Courtney stood, grabbed her laminated card, and walked out. The board voted unanimously to accept Greg's recommendations. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. I thought that was the end. I was wrong again. Mike finished the fence on Monday. The posts were solid, the panels level, the gate swung smooth. The new fence looked better than anything else on the block. I took photos, sent them to the HOA as proof of completion, and waited for the final inspection. Greg emailed me Tuesday saying the board had approved the project and closed my file. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find another bright orange violation door hanger stuck to my door. This one claimed the fence was too tall, cited a different section of the bylaws, and demanded immediate removal. I took a photo of the notice, checked the bylaws, and confirmed the fence was 6 inches shorter than the maximum height. I emailed Greg with the photo and the measurements. He called me an hour later, his voice tight. Courtney is no longer authorized to issue notices. I told the board last week, this notice is invalid. Ignore it. I asked him what would happen if Courtney kept issuing notices. He sighed. Then we remove her from the board. But that requires a vote. And right now, Ed and Linda are afraid of her. That is when I decided to pull the trump card. I had been holding it since the first hearing, waiting for the right moment. The trump card was a set of board meeting minutes and a quorum log that proved the vote was invalid. I had pulled the official records from the county clerk's office, cross-referenced them with the HOA's internal minutes, and found that 3 of the last 5 board votes had failed to meet quorum requirements. Under the bylaws, any vote without quorum was void. I called Rita. She reviewed the documents and confirmed my analysis. If those votes were void, that meant multiple policies, budgets, and enforcement actions were invalid. It also meant Courtney's appointment to vice chair had never been properly ratified. I presented as a timeline, so the facts are undeniable even to people who hate drama. I put together a spreadsheet showing every board meeting, the attendance records, the quorum requirements, and the votes that failed. I color-coded the invalid votes in red. I added notes explaining the bylaw sections that were violated. Then I printed 50 copies and mailed one to every homeowner in the community, along with a cover letter explaining what it meant. The response was immediate. My email inbox flooded with messages from neighbors thanking me, asking questions, sharing their own stories of Courtney's enforcement. 3 neighbors offered to testify if I went to court. 2 others said they were filing their own complaints. One neighbor, a retired attorney, offered to help me draft a formal petition to remove Courtney from the board. Greg called me Thursday. The board is holding an emergency meeting Saturday. You need to be there. Courtney is going to challenge your timeline. Bring your evidence. I showed up Saturday with the full packet, the county records, the attendance logs, the bylaws, the surveyor report, and a printed copy of every email, notice, and threat Courtney had sent. Rita came with me. So did the retired attorney neighbor. The room was packed. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls. Greg opened the meeting by acknowledging the timeline I had circulated. He confirmed that he had reviewed the county records, and my analysis was correct. 3 board votes in the last year had failed to meet quorum, which meant those votes were void. He turned to Courtney. Do you dispute these findings? She stood, laminated card in hand, but this time she looked less confident. The quorum rules are advisory, not mandatory. The board has operated this way for years. No one has ever challenged it. Greg shook his head. The bylaws are clear. Quorum is not advisory. It is mandatory. Any vote without quorum is void. That means the budget you approved, the enforcement policies you adopted, and your own appointment to vice chair are all invalid. The room went silent. Courtney sat down, her face pale. Ed raised his hand. If her appointment is invalid, does that mean she is not vice chair? Greg nodded. Under the bylaws, yes. She has no authority to issue notices, approve applications, or represent the board in any capacity. Linda spoke next. What about the fines and notices she issued while she was vice chair? Greg looked at the timeline. If those actions were taken under an invalid appointment, they are void. The HOA will need to refund any fines collected and rescind any liens. A neighbor in the back shouted, "How much is this going to cost us?" Greg did not answer immediately. He flipped through his notes, then looked at the board. Based on the enforcement actions I have reviewed, approximately $40,000 in fines and legal fees. The HOA will need to cover those costs, which means a special assessment unless the board can recover the funds from Courtney personally. Courtney stood again. You cannot make me personally liable for board actions. I was acting in good faith. Greg looked at her. You were acting without authority. If the board votes to pursue recovery, you will need your own attorney. The retired attorney neighbor stood. I move that the board vote to remove Courtney Cooper from any leadership position and pursue recovery of all costs incurred by her invalid enforcement actions. Ed seconded. The vote was unanimous. Courtney walked out, and this time she did not come back. The meeting continued for another hour. The board voted to adopt a new policy requiring actual evidence before fines, a neutral appeal process with written decisions, and mandatory recording of all hearings. They voted to refund every fine Courtney had issued in the last year. They voted to send a formal apology letter to every homeowner who had been targeted. And they voted to hire an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances and procedures. Greg looked at me. Do you still want to proceed with your small claims case? I nodded. The board has not refunded my fine yet, and I am still owed the cancellation fee I paid when Courtney delayed my contractor. Greg turned to the board. I recommend you settle. The costs of litigation will exceed the settlement amount. Ed looked at Linda. She nodded. They voted to pay my claim in full, plus legal fees. I left the meeting with a check for $4,000, a formal apology from the board, and a promise that the new fence policy would be adopted at the next meeting. Rita hugged me on the way out. You did it, she said. You actually did it. But the real payoff came 2 weeks later. The board held its first meeting under the new procedures. The agenda was posted online a week in advance. The meeting was recorded. Every vote was documented with attendance and quorum confirmed. And when the board voted to adopt the new fence policy, it included a requirement that all enforcement actions be supported by a third-party surveyor report and reviewed by the HOA attorney before any notice could be issued. The funny karma moment came during the vote. One of the neighbors raised his hand and asked if the new policy applied retroactively. Greg said yes. The neighbor grinned. So if Courtney had followed this policy, none of this would have happened? Greg nodded. Exactly. The room burst into laughter. Even Ed and Linda smiled. Courtney tried one more time to block the policy. She sent a letter to the board claiming the new rules were overly burdensome and would prevent the HOA from maintaining community standards. Greg responded with a 2-page memo explaining that the rules were based on New York law and the HOA bylaws, and any attempt to circumvent them would expose the board to liability. He ended the memo with a single line: the HOA attorney is required to correct board members who misinterpret the law, even when those corrections are uncomfortable. A policy clarification that destroys Karen's favorite tactic. The board sent the memo to every homeowner. Courtney did not respond. She stopped showing up to meetings. By the end of the year, she had resigned from the board entirely and moved out of the community. The HOA votes to require actual evidence before fines became the standard across Ironwood trails. Enforcement dropped by 70% in the first 6 months. The new board adopted a transparency policy requiring all records to be posted online within 48 hours of any meeting. And the community started referring to the fence policy as the Courtney rule, a reminder that even the most vindictive board member could be stopped if you kept receipts and stayed calm. Karen gets corrected by the HOA attorney in plain language became the running joke at every board meeting. Whenever someone tried to push through a rule without evidence or bypass procedures, someone would raise their hand and say, "Do you want Greg to write you a memo?" The room would laugh, and the rule would get tabled for proper review. The insurer email that Karen used to justify her safety claims turned out to be fake. A neighbor who worked in insurance pulled the policy and confirmed there was no requirement for gate orientation, no liability clause about fencing, and no communication from the insurer about my property. When Greg found out, he added falsifying documents to the list of reasons Courtney should never serve on a board again. Karen says it is about safety, and the insurer email says stop became another joke. Whenever someone made a claim without proof, someone would mutter, "Let me guess the insurer sent an email," and the room would laugh again. My fence is still standing. It has been 3 years now. No violations, no fines, no threats. The gate opens the same direction as it always did, and no security incidents have occurred. The HOA sends me a compliance certificate every year, signed by Greg, confirming that my property meets all standards. I keep it framed in my garage, next to the Surveyor report and the final settlement check. The new board is not perfect. They still argue over budgets and landscaping and parking rules. But they follow procedures. They post agendas. They keep records. And when someone tries to push a rule without evidence, the board tables it and asks for a legal review. Ironwood Trails is not a perfect community, but it is better than it was. The rules are still used, but now they are used as guidance, not leverage. Neighbors still argue, but the arguments stay civil. And the bright orange violation door hangers are gone, replaced by a new system where every notice includes a reference to the rule, the evidence, and a clear appeal process. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA drama, neighborhood justice, and satisfying endings. Rita still helps homeowners navigate HOA disputes. She added my case to her website as an example of what happens when you keep records, follow procedures, and do not back down. She tells clients that the key to winning is not anger or revenge, but patience and evidence. I agree. Mike the contractor still works in the area. He tells people about the tow truck incident at every job site, always ending with, "And the driver looked at the survey and just drove away." His reputation has improved because homeowners know he does not back down when HOAs push him around. Greg is still the HOA attorney, but now he insists on reviewing every enforcement action before it goes out. The board complains sometimes, but they know he is protecting them from liability. He told me once that Courtney cost the HOA more in legal fees than any lawsuit ever could. Ed and Linda are still on the board. They have become more confident since Courtney left. They ask questions, demand evidence, and vote no when something does not smell right. Linda told me at a neighborhood barbecue that she wished she had spoken up sooner. The retired attorney neighbor who helped me draft the petition became the new board president. He runs meetings like a courtroom, strict on procedure but fair. Enforcement is consistent now. Fines are rare. Disputes get resolved through mediation instead of threats. The rideshare driver who rolled his eyes that day became a neighborhood legend. Someone posted a video of him watching the tow truck scene, and it got shared in every HOA horror story group online. He still picks up rides in Ironwood Trails, and he always asks if the neighborhood drama ever died down. I tell him it did. Courtney never came back. Someone said she moved to a condo with no HOA. Someone else said she joined a different board in another town. I do not know, and I do not care. She taught me that rules only work when everyone follows them, including the people who enforce them. The surveyor who wrote the report still does work in Buffalo. He told me later that Courtney tried to pressure him to change his findings, offering to pay extra if he would reinterpret the property line. He refused and reported her to the state licensing board. Nothing came of it, but he keeps a copy of her emails as a reminder of what not to do. The fence has held up through 3 Buffalo winters. The posts are solid, the panels tight, the gate still swings smooth. I check it every spring, tighten the screws, touch up the stain. It is more than a fence now. It is proof that you can fight back and win, as long as you do it the right way. The new fence policy has been adopted by 2 other HOAs in the area. Greg helped draft the language, and now it is a model for how enforcement should work. Clear rules, neutral reviews, evidence required, appeals allowed. Ironwood Trails Reserve Association is not famous, but in HOA circles, people know the name. They know what happened here. And they know that vindictive board members can be stopped. I still see the bright orange violation door hangers sometimes, tucked in a drawer in my garage. I kept them as evidence, but now they are souvenirs. Reminders of the day Courtney tried to steamroll me and found out I had receipts. Reminders that the only way to win against people who weaponize rules is to know the rules better than they do. The neighborhood is quieter now. The drama has faded. The rules are still there, but they are used fairly. People follow them because they make sense, not because they are afraid. And when disputes come up, they get resolved through process, not power. I hope you have a great day.